Welcome to STEMCO's Quarterly Tech Talk. My name is Bryan Perigo, Strategic Accounts Manager for STEMCO. Today we'll be covering Kaiser QwikKit and QuickTie. If at any time during the Tech Talk you have any questions or concern, please use our chat box and someone from STEMCO will be able to help you with your questions.
When you're driven by something, you don't need to be reminded of what gives you purpose or where your true north lies. You just know, because you've been doing it for as long as we have. And along the way, we built a reputation too, for making the roadways safer. And now, it's time to embrace it by refocusing and getting back to doing what we do best. STEMCO wheel end and Kingpin products that perform exceptionally, last longer, and save our customers money. Because that's what you get when you're driven by safety.
Welcome back. I'd like to start by going over some indicators that it may be time to check your kingpins. The first indication would be inconsistent tire wear. When a kingpin is worn, you'll have some inconsistent tire wear related to camber. Secondly, there may be complaints of popping or other noises coming from the system. You may also have drivers complaining of steering issues or pulls or the truck seemingly steering itself. We'd start by getting on our PPE and beginning disassembly after doing a quick check of the current kingpin. Check it with a dial indicator, magnetic dial indicator on the axle and on a knuckle. This is typically done with the tire assembly and everything on with a bar by lifting up on the bottom and applying pressure on the top and checking your dial indicator, and you're looking for anything over 0.010 of an inch. At this point, you would want to remove all your brake assembly and your hub assembly and then start the disassembly of the kingpin system itself by removing your plates. Obviously, yours would have all the bolts and they might be tight, both top and bottom. You'd then remove your draw keys, and you want to take note of their current location so that we can go back the same way. The draw key should be removed using just a punch. You shouldn't need heat or any type of power tools. We'll then remove the kingpin. This should be done with just a brass hammer and a bushing driver. And ours will come out relatively easy. With some systems, you may need to use a press like our quick extract. Then remove your spindle, making sure to get your bearing out of there without dropping it and holding on to your shims. You'd want to take note of the shims you currently have in there and then you'll end up adding a 5,000th shim when you go back, which will be the thinnest of the 3 shims that are available in your kit. At this point, you'd want to inspect your axle eye and clean it up using a brake hone. To clean this up and verify this so that you don't have any burrs or anything that the Kingpin might hang on or anything like that. And then it needs to be measured to verify that your axle eye isn't bad. Do that using a T-gauge, like this, and a micrometer, and taking several measurements in different locations to get an accurate reading to make sure it's not out of round. The specs for this can be found on page 27 of the Kaiser catalog, and you just cross-reference the Kingpin kit that you're using and make sure that you're within 3 thousandths. This is a K961L, and so the axle bore should be between 1.795 and 1.797. Anything over that, the axle would need to be repaired using our Axle Pro equipment. Now we'd want to disassemble or remove our bushings. If this has got standard bushings in it, you would use a tool like this bushing driver here of ours, specifically for this kit, to drive those bushings out. With this system here, it has our spiral bushing in it. So you may need to utilize a screwdriver and lift this up a little. And then this is our T-gauge, or I'm sorry, our T-handle tool, and it just twists clockwise. And you want to stay away from the end so you don't break off that end, and just slowly draw that out. Once you get it out a little ways, you can finish pulling it out by hand, turning it clockwise there. And then you would want to use the same bushing driver to remove your lip seal using a brass hammer. And dispose of this. You'll have new lip seals that should be used when you reassemble. And then we'd do the same thing on the other side. We'd want to inspect this the same way we did our axle eye. On the spindle eye, using a T-gauge and a micrometer, and taking a few measurements. And again, the specs are on page 27 of the Kaiser catalog, and our spec for this particular system is 1.919 to 1.921. Anything over 3 thousandths would require the spindle to be replaced. Cleaning this, similar to what we did, I mean, we'd clean this with emery cloth or maybe a brake hone if necessary, and sometimes a file on the top if you have any burrs that need to be taken care of. You can then begin reassembly. In some of the kits, you'll notice that they'll come with a go or no-go gauge. This is for the axle eye, so it's just a quick way of checking the axle eye, as opposed to using a T-gauge. And this is actually 5 thousandths over the spec, so if it goes in at all into this axle eye, you know that you need to do that repair. So the first thing we'd want to do is reinstall our new lip seal. And again, you'll use the same bushing driver. It has a lip on here specifically for it. And using it, you know that you have this on there right because it doesn't want to go on the other way. But the main thing is that the lip should be facing the axle. So on the bottom, it would go up, and on the top, it'll go down. And again, you just use a brass hammer and get this in to where it's just about flush to the bottom, a little bit above. You don't want to tap it all the way through because it can damage the lip seal, and you need to get a different one. Your bushing will put it in the proper place. And then we would install our new bushing. You'll notice on any of the STEMCO bushings that it has the STEMCO Kaiser name on it, letting you know that it is a genuine Kaiser bushing. And starting this should be done at an angle, and just start by hand again, clockwise, just like when we come out, we go in. Once you get it in, as far as you can by hand, you'll want to utilize your T-handle as well. And stay away from the end, and slowly draw this, push this back in, going clockwise again. You may need to finish with a brass hammer. If you just want to be flush with the top, if this is a threaded Kingpin assembly, then you would need to be just below the threaded portion of the assembly. Next, we'd want to test fit the Kingpin prior to us trying to go through assembly. So you just want to make sure that it goes through each end, and it should just be a nice slip fit. And you do that on both ends. And then you'd want to make sure that it actually goes all the way through the system. If for whatever reason it's hanging up on one side or the other, you could go back and clean that up with a brake hone or emery cloth, get rid of any burrs and try again. If it continues to, you may have an issue with the spindle. And then if it won't make it through both, when you try to slip it through both sides, there's a good chance you have like a spread spindle in which the spindle would need to be replaced. We're ready to go back together with it. You want to make sure that we have the Kaiser top on the top of it, and you want that facing the outside of the spindle or the wheel in, because that'll assure that you line up your keyways. A quick tip here with your shims, like I mentioned earlier, we would utilize what we had before as far as the count. You'll have new shims, and then just add a 5/1000. This should get you real close to making sure that you're at the right amount. A quick tip is to bend these a little bit so they hold in place. This makes it a little bit easier to install this on the spindle or on the axle without pinching your fingers. Again, with the top facing you. Our bearings should be pre-packed, cleaned and pre-packed, or pre-packed with grease. And when you install this, you want to make sure that the lip side is facing down so it doesn't get any water or contamination in it. This should be just a snug fit that can go in with just the palm of your hand. If it's too loose, you may need to add shims. And if it's too tight, you may need to replace or remove shims. Kind of watch your draw keyholes and make sure that you line your keyways up. It may require a little tapping with a brass hammer to get it to the right spot. There you go. We install our new lock keys in the same position they were when we removed them. The lock keys should be torqued down 25 to 30 foot-pounds. And then reinstall our plates, and these should be the new plates that come with the kit. You don't want to reinstall the old ones, as these are a little bit thicker. Make sure your O-rings on here. And these will handle the increased pressure that occurs since we have about 300% more grease in this with those grooves that are cut in the Kingpin. So you want to install both your top and bottom, and of course you'd put all 3 bolts in, but mine has a cutaway here, so. You would install your grease-zert and begin pumping grease. And you want to put grease in it while turning this 4 or 5 times until you see grease starting to come out just between the spindle and the axle. This lets you know that you got enough grease in the system. We'd reassemble, putting your hub assembly back on, going through the TMC procedure, recommended procedure for bearing adjustment. Put your brake assembly back on, your wheels, torque your wheels. And then the final step would be double checking our work and just make sure that we're still within spec. You should have very little movement. And again, with the bar and pressure on the top of the tire, just verifying that we have probably little to no movement, but less than 10 thousandths. After that, it would just need to get an alignment and a test drive, and it would be ready to go. Welcome to the quick tie portion of today's Tech Talk. I'll start by going over a few features and benefits of the assemblies, and then I'll talk about setup and installation. Quick tie is available in 2 different part numbers: a 12,000-pound application that we color code green, and then our 16 and 20,000-pound application that we color code red, and sometimes referred to as Big Red. These 2 applications will adjust from 57 3/8 to 73 7/8 inches, and that's what allows us to cover so many different applications. You'll notice that the quick tie is much longer. So this is what allows us, along with having a much heavier duty tube, which is powder coated, and you can tell it's a lot heavier than your standard tube. But then also having this long tie rod in is what allows us to make such variance and adjustment. There is an indicator here, a limit indicator, that prevents you from taking that out too far. Also, you may notice that there's 3 different relief points on the boot. This prevents over-greasing. You'll also see that these clamps are blue, and only on one side, and that's for a specific reason to allow the tech to know which side to set this up. This will be the curb side. So if there's ever an end replaced in the future, you know the left from the right, because it often happens where people get these reversed and then it's confusing. In the past, when people would install these, they would always order both tie rod ends if they were just changing it in, so they would have that covered. Okay. Next, we'd want to determine which application we would need. So if we have our standard unit, we can measure this while it's still on using one of our guides. And while it's still on the truck, you can take a quick measurement of this. And it's not perfect, but this will give you an idea that it's more than likely whichever one it fits. So this is too large, this is the right size. Once the assembly is removed, or at least your castle nut is removed and it's off of your spindle, you can check the minor OD. The minor OD is the very top of the taper, right where it begins. You could do this with our gauge, or you could do this with just a micrometer if you don't have one of these gauges. You would just slide this over, and if it lines up with this, which it does, this is a 0.96 inches. If it was too small, you would check with the other side. This is obviously too large, but that's 1.08 inches. So there's just the two different part numbers, and this gives you a quick indication of which to use. Once we determine which assembly we need, so in this case it's our standard 967 kit, or assembly, we would measure the old assembly, and the best way to do that is from grease cert to grease cert to determine what we need to set the new assembly at. So then once we get that, this can be threaded out, and you want to do it evenly. On both sides, you want them to be threaded out evenly. So the best way to do that is to kind of figure out your center point. And I would do that by measuring my tube. And then finding a center point. Once you have a center point, you can measure that from end to end and just make sure that you thread these out evenly before installation. Once this is set up and we have our tie rod assembly set up to match our old one, we're ready to begin installation. I'll start by putting my PPE on. We've already got this measured and adjusted based off the measurements we took of the old assembly. We've got each end spaced out evenly. Remember again that the blue clamp should face the curb side. And you want your clamps facing the rear of the truck. Remove our castle nut and our little protector, the green protector. Start by threading the castle nut on one side, and then get your other side in. Just started. The torque spec for the castle nut is 250 foot-pounds. The threads on this assembly, as well as the ends, are already pre-lubricated. We then want to torque our clamps to 60 foot-pounds. And then we also need to install our cotter keys on the castle nuts. These may need to be moved a little bit from after we torqued them, just to get the cotter key in. cotter key shouldn't be reused ever, so use the new ones that come with your assembly. And these would be folded over on both sides. Once our cotter keys are installed and both our clamps are tightened, this is ready to go to the alignment rack or to wherever you have your alignments performed. Thank you guys for joining us. At the end of the video, there will be a link to go to get your certification.